What's up, YouTube? Mr. Limus here, and welcome to part 2 of the speedrunning guide. If you've made it here, you've probably made it further than 80% of people, because a lot of people will see part 1 and they're like, that's a lot to set up, and they're done with it. So, now that you have everything set up for Diablo 2 speedrunning, time to pick a run and class to go after. And this is where I like to go to goodoldSpeedrun.com. So, let's take a look. The first thing, of course, you go to speedrun.com and you just look up Diablo 2 Resurrected right up here, and that'll take you to this page. Now you can see all of the runs that exist. So you have your general common run, which is going to be this any percent bail, normal or hell difficulty, players X. This is going to be 90% of the runs at least. You have the online runs that exist. This is for, okay, if we have our 8-mans and we're going through, then we've got that. Through Hell, through the Torch, right? All of that stuff. But generally, not many people are going to be running those. You have your classic runs. So this is purely going through classic. Your 100% runs, which are going to have their own history or rules. And you can always look up the rules of what things are within the category. Finish all quests, collect all waypoints, and kill the Cow Kings. There are 27 quests in normal runs and 81 in Hell. So the timer ends in normal when this happens. The timer ends in Hell when all of this happens. Right? And then for verification, show all quests fully completed and waypoints unlocked at the end of your video submission. And if it's a sorceress, it must be sorceress. And you are allowed to start as a non-expansion character. So just know in normal runs, you can start as a classic character and then convert, but you must convert by the end for it. So each category that you go within will have the rules right there within the category and what all can happen. So if you ever have any questions or issues, just look in there for the rules, right? So you have that, you have your new game plus, you have your 1 to torch runs, etc. Pacifist, declone, right? There's just some like fun, silly runs within various ones. But again, most of your running will be within here. However, if you wish to be the person that drives more 100% runs, you can go do that. So you go there and now you can pick kind of from here what you're looking for. Do I want to do normal runs? Do I want to do hell runs? What class do I want to choose? And then PX, P8, or Players 1. Here, of course, you can note that Players X is, again, majority of the runs, but you might be interested in doing pure Players 8 runs only or something and having some fun with that. So always, again, don't feel forced into anything. You can always choose whatever it is. And if you even want to start a new category, you can start running that category. And if it gets popular and some people seem to enjoy it, we can get it added in for you. But when choosing your runs, what I like to do first is think about what kind of run am I feeling like? And the reason is the runs are extremely different. So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about each of them to give you a sense of it. So the Amazon is going to be, if you're using current speedrunning strategies, you're going to be running with Poison Javelin for a while, and then you're going to be taking that into Lightning Javelin, right? Now, the big holdups and difficulties with the Amazon are her frames absolutely suck. So she's terrible, terrible, terrible with teleporting around. It just feels absolutely miserable when you have your teleport staff right. And that can be really rough. The nice thing is she has really solid AoE. She doesn't have very good crowd control because until you really get decoy very late on, if you want to get a decoy or Valkyrie, you're just not going to have that much ability to stop all the mobs, right? So she does have some difficulty in that regard, but she's kind of glass cannon in that, you know, especially when you're running with like your poison jabs, you run, you throw your poison jab, and then you kind of run past and let everything die on the way. The more you can do that sort of stuff, the faster the character can be. So I do think she's enjoyable, but she can be a little rough with that. The assassin is just going to be fire traps into light traps. You'll actually start with blades really early in the current speedrunning strategies. So you'll go like blades into fire traps into light traps. And she is kind of the best starting class. So if you are looking to get into speedrunning, this is my recommendation. Especially if you want to get a run through hell, I'd say this is your strongest bet. Through normal, I think Druid is actually probably like one of the better ones. But through hell, I think this is one of the best ones. She's very fast. She has good frames. She has good life totals because she gets good, life per vitality point. She just has great crowd control with your Mind Blast, which you'll get later on and such. She does lightning damage in the end there, which you can use lower res ones on, and just does so much solid damage. So I think this is a fantastic character. She breezes through a lot. You can stick on player's aid a majority of the game. You'll feel totally fine, and it's just a solid speedrunning character overall. Necromancer, I would not recommend as the starter, mostly because the strategies are the edge golem necro, and it kind of is this weird. So you start out first off in teeth, which are very weak and don't really gain strength fast enough. And so the teeth kind of start to wear out. Then you shift into Bone Spear, which has not great AoE, requires a lot of positioning, and just kind of makes him slower overall. Then, normal Necromancer is at least simple, but he's not like crazy great feeling. But he's simple-ish. Once you get into the hell version of it, it starts to definitely get more complex because, again, you're going and farming an edge bow, you're becoming a thorns necro, running around, using your golem, and then revives as a way for mobs to kill themselves with the thorns, and then corpse exploding everything. And something that I actually find difficult with this character, I do think it's fun, but I find difficult, is he doesn't have great survivability as much with it. You feel like with the golem and with the revives, he'd be like more survivable, but he actually feels pretty weak in that regard. Whereas the strategy used to be bone prison everything, and then he felt a lot better because you could always just bone prison the entire screen if you were getting overwhelmed, and then everything would chill out and you'd be fine. He also has bad life gain, which is difficult. So, because he only gets 2 life per vitality point. So he's a little bit squishier in that regard. And you're also, because you're going into corpse explosion and all of this, you're not really getting the points in bone armor. So you're not getting the bone armor that we used to get with the Necromancer, which was a little bit better there. Barbarian, I actually think is a decent experience through the game. I think he's kind of in the mid section. I wouldn't recommend him as your first playthrough. Normal, of course, can be a little bit difficult because it's just a little slow. You're going through your double swing. It's just taking a while and you're having to level and build him up and all of that. But once you get him to Warcry, he actually becomes pretty fun, especially when you have dual spirit now. He can just run around, have lots of good skills, get tons of mana, tons of FCR from that. And honestly, the big mana boost that you get from 2 spirits plus whatever else you have is super helpful and super nice. And then he just kind of runs around and shouts everything and kills it. Now, you will be doing leap attack generally in this speedrun in the middle before you go into Warcry, but that's also kind of fun because, again, it's a big leap with an AoE. The big thing I would say about the leap attack is you really do want to have a shield for it. I find that getting even just like a random blue shield when you're 18 there is very helpful. Just go get like a random blue shield from Act 2, whatever, and bone shield, and you'll get nice blocking because when you're leaping into the middle of stuff, you just get hit a lot. But I actually think this is one of the mid characters I would say to go play once you've done a couple of runs. It's very fun, and then it does have some grind for runes because you do need to go get some of the runes for dual spirits. You do want to get something for crushing blow as well. So there's a little bit of that. Paladin, I think, is a medium run as well. I like the Paladin run a lot personally. You kind of can decide if you want to go max block or if you just want to go into life. His normal starts out, and the current speedrunning strats actually make it a lot more difficult because before you had the normal paladin, just kind of go holy fire. And that was very simple. Holy fire into hammers. But now you're starting out and you're going holy bolt, but holy bolt doesn't really kill anything in Act 2, so you're having to avoid all the monsters in Act 2 until you hit hammers, but you want to get the holy bolt through the arcane, so basically you kill nothing all the way to the arcane sanctuary, then you level up massively in there when you're killing things, and it's just like, it's gotten a lot more technical, I think. It used to not be as technical. Now it's more of a technical run. Of course, once you get to hammers, you're pretty strong. You're solid with your hammers. And, you know, he's a solid character to kind of take through the game. But I think because of the technical aspects in the early parts, I'd put him more in the middle of when I would play it. Sorceress, you would think would be like right at the start, but I actually think Sorceress you should wait on a tiny bit, or at least maybe give it a try early and then put it to the back burner, because Sorceress runs into a couple things. Number one, she has teleport, and so she is very squishy, bursting, basically, right? You are like teleporting max speed through all the areas. You're trying to fly around as fast as possible. And then you're squishy as can be, but of course another glass cannon character right there. But it's just like really difficult. What I also really dislike about the Sorceress in speedruns is it doesn't help you learn maps as well. And so if you're just starting out and learning, I don't think you should pick the Sorceress, because you're not going to learn the maps nearly as well as a character that needs to run through, you know, all of the Flare Dungeon level 3. When you're physically running through each of those maps, you're going to start learning what every Flare Dungeon level 3 map looks like, and then you'll be better to know where those all are. Whereas here, with the Sorceress, you just go, oh, it's the top left corner, and you just teleport to it, and you don't know the ideal path to get there, which for 6 other classes, you will need to know. So she has that issue. Additionally, if you go through Hell, she has immunities issues, which, again, you'll have to be more technical in how you're playing and picking and choosing for each of the different spots that you need it, what you're doing, what your build is going to be exactly. So a little bit more difficult there. But again, if you're like dead set on doing it, go ahead, right? Like if this is like the character you want to speedrun, I always say like pick what you want to speedrun and that you think you'll love the most. But I'd put her again as kind of a mid run. And then lastly, we have the Druid, which again, I think with the Assassin is your strongest early pick. So I always say Assassin or Druid first. I think they're a great introduction to it. First off, Poison Creeper is just like the most broken thing ever now. And so for the first 12 levels, you just let that thing run. You just run on players 8 and it'll just like murder everything around you. It's insane. But then you get to Fissure, which is the second most broken thing ever. And so you just run and drop a Fissure and then keep running and everything dies. So really, he just goes from like broken skill to broken skill. And then you have really like not bad mana use whatsoever either. And so a single tier rune is insanely strong. And you'll get that when you make a leaf in your staff that you'll run around with, because it's +3 to fire skills, and that counts for druids as well, or assassins or anybody with fire skills. And so with that tier rune, you're just running around and you never run out of mana, and it's a very simple run in that regard. The difficult part can be he doesn't have the best life gain. He gets 2 life per vitality point. So he can be a little squishy in that regard. And then if you're doing a Hell run, when you shift to Wind, you will get Cyclone Armor, which can be really nice later for the elemental damage. But I do feel like when I shift to Wind and I'm having to cast Tornadoes, you're generally having to be pretty close, because Tornadoes have like the worst direction in the world. Sometimes they go like backwards and, you know, never the direction you want. And so a lot of times you need to be like really getting up on monsters, and being as squishy as you are, it can be a very quick death for them. So I think through Hell, I prefer the Assassin because she has all the crowd control and stuff. Druid, you might get a bear late or something, but for the most part, you don't have nearly as much help. But it does give you still a solid class, solid damage that can take you through overall. So those are kind of the 7 different classes, and then just an overall look again at the different runs, because again, if we look right here, you can go through and you can see what the runs are, when those runs have been, and you can also go through and watch. And this is my final tip to you, is go through and literally click on it and say, oh wow, this run, and some of the players like Novice and stuff are Korean, and so you can still watch it and gain some stuff. I'd actually recommend watching, like in English if you can, just because it'll help you sometimes to read the items a little bit more of what they're seeing and what they're picking up or not picking up. But find a language that does work for you and you can read, and then literally go through and just watch the run, go to different points in the run and figure out and pick out, okay, so here's what he's doing. He's not leveling in this area at all. When I watch multiple of the videos, nobody seems to level here. He's this level at this point. And just kind of note down those pieces, what the runs are, what the speed is of all the stuff, any and every of that, right? So that's always just a great way to learn and get a good idea of kind of current strategies, what players are doing, and more, right? Anything and everything with it. And that's how I kind of pick a run. So, that's what I'm thinking of every time I'm deciding. I'm like, do I feel like doing a run that's going to take a longer time? Because I guess that's the final thing really, is note the time that it takes for the fastest run. But also, if you're just getting into speedrunning, note the times that you're seeing for really some of the slower submitted runs down here, right? If I want to do a Hell Barbarian, curse you, Kano, I can say, okay, it takes 4 hours, 11 minutes, 4:37, 4:43. But I can also see Nadine, it took 7 hours, 44 minutes down there. And that's a really good thing to know. You'll probably be down below that for your first run, right? Okay, I want to do a Hell Players 8 Barb. Well, one of the best speedrunners in the game, it took 8 hours and 40 minutes. And that's in-game time. That's 9.5 hours actually. 327, another great runner, took over 10 hours for this. And yes, even when you go to the bathroom, that timer is continuing to run. So you're not pausing this. You're not doing like you're basically just sitting down and playing for 10 hours, 44 minutes and 38 seconds straight or whatever. And again, these are really good runners. Only two speedrunners compete for Hell Players 8. Hell Players 8 Barbarian, only 2 people have submit times for that. Yes. It's not a very competitive category because, I don't know, not many people want to do Hell Players 8 Barbarian. But maybe you want to. But note, it may take a while. And when you're going through and getting into speedrunning, the last thing that I will say is don't worry about your time for the first time, the second time, any of this. Like, worry about it in the way of having it as a base point, but don't worry about it in the way that you need to have this, like, oh, you need to always be improving with it and always this, and it needs to be close enough. And no. My first normal sorceress speedrun took 4.5 hours. That was the first speedrun I ever did. I watched somebody speedrun. At that time, the record was like 2 hours. This was, 10 years ago when speedrunning was in its infancy and there was nowhere near the strategies and whatever. But I watched it and I was like, okay, I think I can do that. And I got on and it took 4.5 hours and I was insanely slow going through it. And I was like, all right, that was harder than I thought it was going to be. And so then I did it again. And then it was like 3 hours and 20 minutes. And then I did it again and I got into the 2s. And then I did it, right? Like, you will build up over time, but it's not going to be instantaneous. This is a hard game. This is something that I want to say. Diablo 2 is a hard game, and it actually looks easier to speedrun than it is. And the reason it does is because you don't feel the same struggle when you're watching it. But when you're playing it, you have my character's stuck in hit recovery. It's taking a second for them to turn. All these things that in your mind, you're like, why have they not done it already? But when you're actually doing it, it's like, oh, they can't right now. Their character is stuck there. They're having this issue. So that is something I will say. It is much harder to speedrun than it is to watch the speedrun. So you will run into struggles and issues. And then on top of that, there's just so many things to remember. You're going to be trying to think about, oh, what do I do on this map? Which way is the turn for that? Do I have, is this gear I want to pick? Like, there's so many things, and it's just going to be a lot. But you will improve. So just give it time, go through a few runs, and then you'll be good to go. So anyways, I hope that that gave you a little bit. Again, I'm trying to just introduce you to the current meta of every character. The meta sometimes shifts. There may be a new way that a character is being run in the future, but that's the current meta of each character and kind of how we're playing through and where I rate them in difficulty for kind of starting with speedrunning. So with that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe, YouTube. I'll see you guys in part 3. Peace.